are all unique and have our own personal story. So dive in with me and let's get to know some extraordinary people. We are all unique and have our own personal story. Hey guys, welcome to Dive In with Amy. This week I had a chance to sit down with Jamie Levi, an amazing woman, and I'm excited for you to listen to her episode. She's extremely wise. I have known Jamie my whole life. She's the daughter of one of my mom's best friends. What is your favorite book and why? Now, I know this is a hard question because how do you choose?
Yeah.
Now, the reason I ask you this question is because Jamie is probably one of the most well-read individuals out there. If I'm not mistaken, I think I remember you saying at one point you would read 6 or 7 books a week.
I average 3 to 4, but I read very fast. So that's
3 to 4 books a week.
Which is kind of a pain because like for a long time I was buying books, and finally one year my husband got me a Kindle for Christmas because he said, "We're not buying another damn bookcase," you know? Yeah. So he bought me a Kindle, and actually I didn't think I was going to like the Kindle because I love the feel of the book and turning pages and the smell and I just love books.
Right.
But what I really like about it is whenever I would travel, I had this horrible dilemma of how many books can I cart with me because I read fast, and that was a pain. Yeah. So I really like the Kindle for that reason, to take it with me. It can go anywhere. I carry it to work with me too. I take it everywhere.
That's amazing.
But my favorite book, wow. I read so many genres too. I would probably say one of the ones that affected me quite a bit was The Last Lecture.
The Last Lecture. And who is that by?
You know what? I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but he actually was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, I think it was. And he ended up getting cancer and went through the whole process. And a lot of basically what the book is based on is a lot of the professors, when they're going to retire or whatever, they give what they call the last lecture. Mm-hmm. Well, in his case, it was going to be because he was going
forced
to die.
To retire.
Yes, he was going to die eventually.
Right.
And so it was just really touching. And after I read the book, which I thought was amazing.
Was this fiction or nonfiction?
It's nonfiction.
Okay.
He talks a lot about, just general things in life and how his parents let him use his imagination. And it was really touching for me because one of the things that my parents blessed me with was they always told me that I could do anything that I put my mind to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I didn't believe it. Every child goes through periods of insecurity or whatever, but they always, whenever I wanted to do anything, I was always encouraged that I could do it.
Right.
If I put my mind to it, I could do it. So, and that was one of the chords that struck me because I think his parents were the same way. It was just so fascinating. And after I read the book, I found his lecture online. But it was kind of a little bit of a killer for me because in the book, he talks about how he was giving his last lecture. And at the end, his wife, who was in the audience, came up and she put her arms around him, and everybody's, standing ovation and the whole thing because everybody knows his story.
Yeah.
And she gets up there and hugs him, and she's talking in his ear and she's saying, "Please don't die. Please don't die." Which, then I went and watched the lecture itself because he had it videotaped, and you can find it online. I'll have to find his name for you. For some reason I cannot remember, but when I watched that and I saw her go up and hug him, I was thinking in my mind, because you can't hear her saying that.
Right.
Otherwise, if you hadn't read the book, you would never have known.
Exactly.
But I thought it had such a great message about a lot of things.
What did he teach?
I believe it was animation. It's been a long time since I've read it.
Okay.
And it was just really fascinating.
Do you know how long he lived after that last lecture?
I kind of, after I read the book, he was still alive when the book came out. And he had a blog online for a while, and I would check it periodically, and I believe it was about 2 years.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly, but he is gone, and he's been gone for quite some time because the book came out, 10 or more years ago, probably.
Wow.
So
you say you read a lot of genres.
I do.
Which one is your favorite?
Well, I do read some biographies and things like that because I enjoy history.
Right.
But really, for me, reading is more of an escape, kind of. So I really like, I like mysteries. I like thrillers. But interestingly enough, for a long time, I didn't think I liked fantasy, but I do.
Right.
I mean, more adult fantasy, but still.
Right.
It can be really a fun thing to read. So
have you read Harry Potter?
Yes. And I actually read that because my kids were starting to read it and the movies were coming out, and I thought, I want to read the books just to see what they are. And I just whizzed through them.
And you enjoyed them?
I didn't start reading them until the fourth one came out, and I think I read the 4 of them in about 2 weeks. So,
nice. So you liked them. Yeah. Harry Potter is a bit of a sensitive subject in our marriage. So my husband reads all 7 books every 2 years. Like clockwork. He loves Harry Potter. And I like to read. My favorite, I love to read biographies, memoirs. That's my all-time favorite. I have a hard time with fantasy. I always have. I just can't get into it. So at one point, we listened to an audiobook, and I pretended that I was interested. Well, it wasn't until like
you mean
a year later.
Harry Potter audiobook?
Harry Potter audiobook. So we listened to it. It's like, oh yeah, this is so great. Well, a year later, I'm sitting in this very room doing a podcast with my brother, Jeff and Elise, my brother and sister-in-law. And it was on opposites attract and marriage and whatnot. And it was a secret. We had to reveal a secret that we've kept from each other. And I revealed to my husband that I really wasn't into Harry Potter. I couldn't get into it. And I'm sure if I really gave it a shot, I'd probably get into it.
Well,
sure I will.
Let me ask you this, though. How far into it did you get? Did you read the first 2 or 3 books?
I didn't even read it. I just listened to the first 2 hours.
Of what book? Of what book, though?
The first.
Okay.
I've seen all the movies.
Okay, because what I was going to say is the first few books are a little bit, because he's young.
Right.
But later on, I thought the books, and I just thought they were really well written.
Well, and that's what I've heard.
The story was fabulous.
Right. And and I've heard that from everyone. So I know that I need to give it a chance. So I figured I'm going to do that when Cece's, and she's coming up. I mean, she's 7, so she's got a couple of years till she can really get into him. So I'm going to give it another shot. But anyway, that was a sensitive subject with us, because when he found out, you should have seen the look on his face. He was devastated. So I just had to ask going on.
You can tell him I'll come over and read them with him.
Seriously. But he does. He reads them every year. Every 2 years, all 7 books. Okay. Really quickly, I want to circle back to the last lecture, okay?
Okay.
And you said something. You said you were able to relate to it because just some of the feelings you got as you read it brought back some mememories and just some interactions with your parents, right? Some of the lessons that your parents instilled in you growing up. Excuse me. Do you mind just sharing a little bit more? Let's dive deeper into the lessons that your parents taught you around achieving what you can do anything. You can achieve your dreams. You can do anything. Let's dive into some more of those life lessons from your parents. Before we do that, we both of us in this room, we are huge fans of your parents. Your parents were like grandparents to us growing up. At one point, they were our neighbors for a few years. So I have such fond memories of your parents. They're just the most wonderful people. Your mom, the classiest woman. And I always remember her sitting on her chair doing her crossword.
Oh, yes.
So you come by it naturally with her reading glasses and her beautiful curly hair and just so classy. Always dressed to the nines. Julie, I was talking to Julie about her on the phone just today, actually, because I was telling her I was going to do the podcast with you. And she brought up her Trident gum. Do you remember?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
She had her little things. Wasn't it cinnamon?
Cinnamon, yep.
It was cinnamon?
Yes. I love her. And her Maxima. And it was always, everything was just always very pristine and clean. with your mom?
You know what? It's interesting because sometimes the image that we put forth isn't always how we really are. Like my mom always felt like she was not very attractive.
Wow.
So the way that she appeared and how she dressed and how she presented herself was always really important to her. Which is something I didn't realize as a child and only recognized when I became an adult.
Really?
That's what it was, because it wasn't like she voiced it or anything like that. My dad in particular we always kind of joke that he was more of a nurturer than my mom was. My mother was more of an introvert, a little bit reserved, and just didn't really, she was great. When we got involved in activities and things, and a lot of the other parents wouldn't necessarily get involved with, taking the kids places and that sort of thing. My mother was always the one that was driving me and my friends everywhere under the sun, and my siblings also.
Right.
And so she was really, really great in a lot of ways. And interestingly enough, I find it interesting that she had a few of her own insecurities about the way she looked, and also things like she would never, speak in public or anything like that. I don't think she ever did in her entire life. And, but yet when it came to us, we were encouraged and told, you can do this. You have, and my dad was very much that way too.
Yeah.
So
I would have never guessed that about your mom. That is just so fascinating to me. Wow. She is something else. And then your dad, I have very fond memories of him too. I remember one time he was watching us. Your parents were both watching us. Our parents were out of town, and we were outside, and I think some neighbors were out in the yard. Everybody was kind of talking, and I kept standing on your dad's toes, like playing around with him, and I was starting to get annoyed. He told me, stop doing this, and I just kept doing it. And he kind of got a little mad at me, just, which I obviously deserved. But I remember that broke my heart, because your dad was so sweet. It broke my heart. And I ran back to my house, which is literally right next door. And I hid. And then he came out. He found me, and he came and got me and gave me the biggest hug and was telling me, I love you so much. Like, but basically teaching me a lesson. When I tell you something, you need to listen, you know? Exactly. And he did. He taught me a lesson, but I remembered that. I still remember that. That's probably one of my first lessons of heartbreak. I was so devastated that I upset him. I'll never forget that. But your dad also taught me and my sisters how to whistle. He was the
Which I can't even do. I don't think he taught me.
He taught us how to whistle. And then your dad owned a rock shop in St. John's.
Yes, he did.
And I remember in our science projects when we were learning about rocks, we would go to the rock shop and he would hook us up. We always had the best presentations, thanks to your dad.
All of us have a huge love for petrified wood and fossils. And,
yeah, I'll bet.
And, tumblestones and that sort of thing, because that's just something that he loved to do.
Right.
And so we grew up with that. I have so much of that.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah, Hugh kind of threatened me. He said, look, you can't display every single trilobite or ammonite or whatever, So I've kind of pared it down.
How many boxes would you say were boxed today with the movers?
Well, we're not moving those with us.
Okay.
We have a storage unit here.
Well, okay. So okay.
We're taking a lot of that over, but some of it I haven't even boxed up. I've tried to tell my kids, you guys need to come over and take some of this. Take it now, because like I have 6 sets of petrified wood bookends. Wow. I have slabs. I have a ton.
Wow.
I really do. So it's kind of, you sort of come to a place where I love all that stuff. And if I had my way, all of it would be out.
Right.
And stuff like that, but you do come to a place in your life where you realize that it's time to let go of some stuff.
It's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah. You need to minimalize at some point.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That is hard.
Yeah. And moving has been, I kind of live with an organized hoarder. And so, we've had these ongoing I don't want to say arguments, but sometimes it does escalate to that where I'll say, we haven't used it in 15 years. Why do we, we've been in the house for 15 years.
Right.
Why do we still have this?
Right.
So yeah.
Oh.
A lot of stuff like that.
Okay. Any other, just really, when you think about your mom and dad, because I am just, you obviously know I've said this, I'm a huge fan of your parents. I would love to get a deeper dive just into some more of the life lessons they've given you, just the ways they've impacted you personally.
My siblings and I joke that we grew up in that our image of marriage was a little bit skewed from the standpoint that my parents had such a good relationship and were obviously in love. There was no bones about that ever. Everybody knew, it was a topic of conversation with family members and that sort of thing. So we all thought we're going to get married and we're going to have
what it's gonna look
this
like.
lovely little thing, And it took me a long time. I don't think that initially when I got married that I necessarily viewed that.
Right.
But sometimes, like if I had gotten into a fight with my husband or something, I would think, well, why isn't it like this? And just recently, my two siblings and I were talking about how, it takes you a while to realize that your relationship is completely different. Mm-hmm. You've married somebody who isn't your dad. You've married somebody who isn't your mother.
Right.
They come from a different background, whatever the case is. And you have to realize that it doesn't make it wrong to not have the same kind of relationship like that.
That's a good point.
But I feel like my childhood, and sometimes I listen to other people talk about their childhood, but mine was pretty ideal. It was.
That's
wonderful. It was just one of those families that we did a lot of things. We went camping all the time. We took, trips together. Mm-hmm. And it was just really other than me being the oldest and torturing especially the brother just younger than me.
Was that Frank Elliott?
Yes. We really did not, there just wasn't, much fighting or yelling or anything like that. And so, and I'm a yeller, go figure. And so you grow up in that atmosphere. And like I said, you think that it's going to be the same, and it's not, but my personality is not the same. My mother was more shy. You probably didn't see her that way because you knew her, but she was more of a shy person and kind of reserved and stuff like that. And I'm not like that at all. I don't know a stranger.
Right.
So, there's just things about your parents that you come to realize they're human beings.
Right. They're not perfect.
They made mistakes, they, things that they did, but overall I can't, and as I said, we joke all the time about how we had this perfect little upbringing,
Right. That's
like
so
something
nice.
You would read in a book, really.
Right.
It was like that for us. And I don't think while you're living it, you're thinking that.
Exactly. You don't realize until later on.
Exactly. It's when you're an adult and you look back but there's some things. One of the things that I really appreciated about my dad is that he was very, he didn't mix any words. So when it came to anything that we wanted to know about sex or anything like that, he was blunt.
Good. Yeah.
And that is one of the things that I took, with my kids. Mm-hmm. I've been very upfront with my girls and Connor to a degree, but more my girls,
right.
About that kind of thing. And I don't mince any words. And
what though? That's refreshing. I think that's so important.
Well, I figure
so
it's whose responsibility is to tell them.
To teach them. Exactly. They're going to learn about this. They're going to confront it at some point.
Exactly.
Wouldn't you want to be the ones to just initiate those conversations and those teachings?
Well, and even to make them realize, I can remember Connor when he, who's my youngest, and he got into, I think he was junior high going into high school. And he comes home and he starts telling me, about, he was a freshman in high school, and he starts telling me about all these girls who are having sex with these boys and yada, yada, yada. And so I stopped him and I said, okay, first of all, boys like to brag, you know.
And exaggerate,
I said,
maybe.
so that may or may not be true.
Right.
And I said, and number 2, you will not be one to gossip about that girl.
Good
I
for
said,
you.
because you don't know if it's true or not.
Yes.
And so you're not going to be the one to perpetuate something that's a lie, that could be a lie.
Right.
Because her reputation, and if it's not true, then look, what damage have you done to her? And I said, you have to realize that some of the things that you're hearing are not correct.
Yeah.
And I said, would you want anybody talking about your sisters that way? And he said, well, no. And I said, okay, then there's your answer.
What a powerful
so
lesson.
when you hear it, keep your mouth shut.
Right. That is awesome.
Whether or not he did, I have no idea. I mean,
I'm sure he did.
He's a teenager, so probably not all the time. But.
Right. But you know what, Jamie? The fact that you have this teenage boy in high school, comes home and talks to you about these things, right? The fact that he feels comfortable to even address these things with you, that says something. And I think that's so important.
Well, I have to tell you that it all starts, in my opinion, when your kids are young, because some of the things they ask you are absolutely hilarious. But I never, ever laughed.
Yeah.
To them. I never laughed to them. My husband and I would die laughing about it later.
Right.
Like if he wasn't there and I was repeating it to him.
Right.
And he used to just completely piss me off because sometimes they would ask me things and he would go in the kitchen and I could see him over there shaking, and laughing. And I'm just like, dude. But anyway, but I never laughed. And the reason that I didn't was because I knew that if I ever laughed that they would think it was something to be embarrassed about.
Exactly. Or make them feel silly or
yes,
dumb.
Exactly. And make them feel dumb. And so, and a lot of times I would tell them, sometimes they would come home and tell me things that they heard at school. And then I would tell them some of the things that you're going to hear are not going to be correct.
Yeah.
So the information you're getting, some of it's right, some of it's wrong. So if you ever really want to know, then you come home and ask me and I will tell you. And I always did that. Jamie. Now, sometimes you have to make it age appropriate for however old they are.
Right, absolutely.
But but
it's the honesty and the transparency has always been there.
Yes. I mean, even when my girls, got married and all that stuff, I basically flat out told them. Some of the conversations are kind of funny because it's information I think they need to know, but they do get kind of embarrassed a little bit. Right. They don't, I mean, they don't say, "Oh, stop, Mom," or anything like that. But I can just see them going, "Oh boy, here she goes."
Give us an example.
Well, okay, look, like when they were getting married, I basically said, "You are responsible for your own pleasure when you have sex.
Good.
And if you can't speak up, then that's your problem. It's not your husband's problem.
Good.
Because if you're going to be in a relationship and make, and part of the reason I did that was because I had so many friends early on when we got married who would come up and say to me, "I don't like sex."
Right.
And I'd think,
it's like a chore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would think to myself, well, then you're not participating.
Right. Exactly.
That's what I would say. So
something's not working and you got to communicate.
Right. But again, I felt like, where are they going to hear this?
Exactly.
Exactly. I'm sure they're hearing things from some of their friends who have had sex already or whatever the case is.
Right. But even in that case, some people may be too embarrassed or not want to admit that maybe things aren't as great as they want them to be.
Right.
And kind of sugarcoat things. So I like how real you are, Jamie. I think that's awesome.
I'm pretty blunt.
I love it. I know. When I asked you to be on the podcast, she said you were too blunt for my podcast. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I want you on here. You're awesome. No, I love that, Jamie. That's fantastic. And you have 3 daughters. 3 daughters. 3 daughters, 1 son. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Beautiful family, too.
Thank you.
You should feel extremely proud.
Yeah, they're pretty good kids. A lot of times I look at them and think, and I tell my husband this all the time, they survived our parenting, actually. Because, you make a lot of mistakes as a parent, too.
Right.
So
it's hard. It's hard trying to figure it all out. I always tell my husband, I'm so nervous. I probably already screwed up my kids and they're only 7 and 4, and it's like.
I honestly, I think most people do the best they can.
Right.
I mean, unless you're belittling your kids.
Right.
I don't think there's too much that you can do to really mess them up.
Right. I think the most important thing is just to build them up. And that's clearly
exactly
what your parents have done to you.
Make them feel like they
can
accomplish whatever it is
exactly.
that they need to.
Build them up. Okay. Do you think you're more like your mom or more like your dad? Or do you have a little bit of both in you?
I think that I'm more like, in some respects, I'm more like my mother's family.
Okay.
From the standpoint that I think that some of them are quite blunt people.
This is the Cowleys.
The Cowleys. Mm-hmm. I think that they're quite blunt people, although I don't think that they are... But, I don't know, because I think how much of it is what you learned and how much of it are you born with?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So, because like you take my sister, she's a lot more introverted and shy than I am. But I would say, and I had a very outgoing father who, by the way, was always whistling, always smiling. Very rarely, I mean, literally I can count on almost one hand the number of times I saw him mad or upset about something. That just was not his nature. Right. And my mom she was just a lot more reserved, just a lot quieter, and that sort of thing. And interestingly enough, here I am talking about how I would go, I'd tell my kids all this stuff, and she was, And really? She did not talk about those topics. No way. It was my dad.
Really?
It was my dad. My dad's the one that told me about sex,
Really?
And yeah, it was. And I don't think that I remember at the time thinking to myself, the first thing I thought was, well, I already know. But the second thing I thought was, this is bizarre to have my dad tell me. I mean, I can remember thinking this as he's talking,
but you weren't awkward. You weren't uncomfortable. You're just thinking, this is like...
he just is real. He just had a way.
Yeah.
One of the things about my mom, there were just certain things that she wasn't able to talk about. And when I've talked to some of my aunts, it was her mother was like, you don't talk about this. You just don't talk about this kind of thing, And then she has a daughter who I'm like, hey, I talk about it all. So I don't know.
That's
awesome.
Where
does that come from?
Right.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that my dad was necessarily that way, but certainly more outgoing. But I guess that what it is I just don't believe in... And it's taken me a lot of years, honestly, to learn when not to say something. Because I've had the unfortunate aspect of my personality is if I think it, I say it. And if somebody says something, I'm like, no, that's not the way it is, or
like
whatever.
When I mispronounced your name.
Yeah, pretty much. That exactly. I mean, I just don't. And what's funny about that is I don't think, because that's my personality, I don't always realize how I'm coming across. One of the things that has been said to me the most in my life, I didn't like you when I first met you.
Really?
Yes. I have had so many people say that to me. And what's so funny from my perspective about that is because I think, well, I'm the same now as...
Right. What you see is what you get.
As when you first met me, and I'm still exactly the same. But I just think that, and I have had people tell me, that's the other thing that they say, you're very blunt.
Right.
You're very... And I think a lot of it is because it's not that I don't sympathize with people, but a lot of times they'll be telling me, some sob story or whatever, and I'll say, well, why didn't you do this? And I'm not even trying to criticize, and that's probably a bad example, but I'm not really trying to criticize the way that they did something.
You're just kind of thinking holistically.
I think out loud sometimes, and I'll just be like, I just don't, and I don't know why I'm this way necessarily, but there's just like, I'm pretty open about my life or, about things. And I just, one of the things I will say I like about getting older is I really don't care what people think about me too much. Although one of my friends said they're not thinking about you. And she does have a point there too.
That's not right. That's not true. Case in point here. When I decided to do this podcast, I'm not kidding. You were one of the first people that came to my mind. No joke. I talked to Julie and Sarah about it. I said, I've got to get Jamie, especially before she moves to Hawaii. I've got to get her on this podcast.
Well, it's a fun experience. I've not done anything like this before.
You're great. So. You're awesome. Okay. So one thing I do have to bring up. Christmas. Mm-hmm. Christmas Eve's coming up next week. What is your favorite family tradition around Christmas?
You know what I'm going to say.
I'm hoping you're going to say, because it's my favorite tradition of your family's, and I kind of want to steal it.
I don't even know how this started. I can't even tell you how it started, but for some reason, every Christmas Eve we do at the end of the night, after everything, whatever we have planned for Christmas Eve. And my family has traditionally gotten together on Christmas Eve. My siblings, my parents, and that sort of thing, and we've kind of continued that on. Now my siblings, we don't get together with my siblings as much anymore, but now all my kids have, we got together. But at the end of the night, we do the hokey pokey.
I love it. It's my favorite thing. And I'm so honored and privileged that I've been able to join you guys, me and my family. Okay, so you do the hokey pokey.
We do the hokey pokey.
Now, when your dad was here, he would play on his baby grand.
Right.
Right? And everybody gets up and dances the hokey pokey.
Yes. And now Lindsay plays.
I love that. That is my favorite.
You know what's fun about it is, and like I said, I don't remember how it got started, but what's really great is the kids love it.
Yeah.
So, and we've always had a few adults that wouldn't get up and participate, but we always all did it.
Right. Yeah.
And my family always all did it, but we've invited people sometimes and they're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And I'm sure they're thinking, why are they doing this? What does this have to do with Christmas Eve, type thing. And I don't even know. Like I said, I don't remember how it got started, but it's just something how we always ended. We ended the night. And so, yeah, it's just a fun little tradition.
And I'm glad you're still doing it. That is so neat.
Still do it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, Jamie, we talked about how well-read you are. If you had to write a book... Not if you had to write a book, because I think you need to write a book. If you were to write a book, what would your book be about? What would be the subject?
I don't know that I necessarily have a subject. I think that I like to laugh, and I think that I would like to write something that would be have a lot of humor in it. I mean, I don't even know why I say that. That would be that's my first inclination when you ask me that.
Right.
Is it's funny because I do like to ponder about things and I like to deep think sometimes, but I do like to laugh. And I think that, especially in the climate now, it's just would be great to have something that you could pick up and think this is really funny. Something in the story.
Exactly.
So, I can't say that I have any certain topic, but that's the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me that.
Now, you've read thousands and thousands of books.
Pretty much.
Have you thought seriously about writing a book?
I've thought about it, and here's the thing. I think that I'd be great at dialogue, but I think I would pretty much suck at the rest of it, like the descriptive part of it, but maybe not. Maybe I wouldn't be as bad as I, think I would. So, but that's a thought. I have thought about that though over the years. Definitely.
Good. I think you need to do it. And I think the next few years is the perfect opportunity to really start it and dive into it. On the beaches of Hawaii, what better place?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said you're good at dialogue. Have you ever thought about writing maybe a screenplay? Because screenplays are all about dialogue.
Oh, and that's true, actually. No, I haven't thought about that, but I just think because sometimes what I actually do occasionally, how people daydream, and what I do is I don't really daydream, but I have a hard time going to sleep at night. So sometimes when I'm laying there, I literally start doing dialogue in my head. Like I have these stories in my head. And I'll do the dialogue, and I switch it around sometimes. And,
you need to get a little recorder.
Yeah, really. By the bed. Whisper it into it.
Is Hugh a light sleeper?
No, he's not.
Oh, I thought you were talking about role play the whole time.
You did want me to ask you about Sex in the 60s?
Sex in the 60s, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that could be hey, you should write.
Yeah, I could write it about Sex in the 60s.
Sex in the 60s. Actually, and that could be very comical.
You know what? That movie was so funny.
Oh, yeah. So she's talking about the book club. And I was telling Jamie before we got started is
I loved seeing the movie book club with Jamie because she was just hysterical throughout the entire movie, which made me laugh through the whole movie.
Yeah, it
was
just
great.
So, I mean, there's a difference, which you don't always understand until you get to be a certain age
Right.
or older, or whatever, you know.
Right.
That you can look back and just think, yeah, you know, some of the things that those women said who were in their like 70s.
Right.
And you're just cracking up because it was so realistic. So,
So funny.
yeah.
So what would your story be about? You said genre.
Sex in the 60s.
Sex in the 60s.
Sex in the
Not
60s.
in the 60s decade. Sex in your 60s.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like Sex in the City, but it's Sex in the 60s.
There you go.
I don't know. I'd actually want people to read it, so maybe Sex in Your 60s wouldn't be such
I
a
don't
great.
know though.
There's a lot of people that have fetishes for that.
That's hilarious. I don't know. You know, okay, so I'm going to give you an example of what
Okay.
I'm thinking of. I was in Chicago. This was, oh my gosh. I can't remember how many years ago, probably 6 or 7 at least, maybe a little bit more. And maybe it was 10 years ago. Anyway, I was coming home, didn't have a Kindle yet. Okay. I don't even think they existed yet. And I thought, I'm flying home. I got to have something to read because, of course, I'd read everything I brought.
Right.
So go into this bookstore and I'm just, browsing everything. Mm-hmm. And I ran into a book by Meg Cabot called, was it The Boy Next Door? I can't remember exactly. Got on the plane, started reading the book, which I guess technically it was romance, but I always think there's a little bit of a difference between chick lit and romance because romance usually delves in with sex and everything like that. And chick lit is just about some of the disasters or funny things that happen when you get in a dating situation. I was laughing out loud at that book. People were staring at me because I kept laughing.
Right.
And that doesn't happen to me very often where sometimes I'll smile a little bit or whatever, but the dialogue to me in that book
funny.
was hilarious.
Oh, that is
and
so
and
funny.
just things that happen to you when you're dating, these crazy things that happen and what you're thinking and what the other person's thinking. And it was just, for me, it was hilarious. And that is when I really started thinking, if I ever write a book,
You
it's
want
gonna
your
be
readers
something-
to have
because
that same
I think
reaction.
that as human beings, we are ridiculous a lot of the times.
Yeah.
The way that we react to things and we think things have to be a certain way.
Just a little too uptight.
Yeah. And I just think that putting humor into some of the ridiculous things that happen that you, for whatever reason, are taking so serious.
Right.
And really, they're absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. That's funny. So you travel a lot. Your husband works for Southwest Airlines.
Travel some.
I would say you travel a lot. Wouldn't you say you travel a lot?
I don't know.
Or maybe just for me, you travel a lot, but maybe
I
in
guess
your mind, you don't travel as much as you'd want.
Exactly.
Maybe at this point.
Yes.
But that's coming soon. Retirement is not too far off for you. Which, by the way, I find it hard to believe, and you're very blunt and open about your life, so I don't think you're going to be upset when I reveal your age.
Oh, no, not at all.
I'm blown away you're 60. You're 61?
61. Yeah.
Blown away you were
know what?
61.
People say that to me sometimes, and I think that is so freaking weird.
Why?
Because I think that I look my age. And what's
60
funny
is young. 60 I find is still very young.
Well, when you get there, you think it's young.
But I still
Heading towards it, you don't think it's young. But
I
when
would
you
never
get
peg you
there,
as 60.
it's-
I wouldn't.
Thank you. I have a hard time when people say that to me, but thank you.
You're welcome.
It's just one of those things. You look in the mirror, you
Right.
watch yourself age.
Yeah.
Like you brush your teeth, do your hair, put your makeup on, whatever it is. So you're sort of watching yourself age. So sometimes I have the feeling, I think, well, maybe I don't look that bad, and then I see a picture even 5 years ago, and I think, oh wow, I've really, really aged. That's what happens to me is when I see pictures of myself. And then that's when I realize how much I've aged.
And I think you look fantastic, honestly.
Thank you.
I kind of bounced around here because with Jamie, I feel like we can just go in a million directions. But I'm going back to my question about your traveling. Okay. When you travel places, What do you like to do most? And I'm going to name 3 things and tell me out of the 3 things.
Okay.
What is most fun or fascinating to you? Sightseeing, people watching, or dining? Or a little bit of everything.
I don't ever think about dining when I travel.
Really?
I mean, obviously you have to eat.
Right,
and then
right.
sometimes I'll think, or if I'm going to a specific place that is famous for something.
Right. Like Memphis, you got to go to have barbecue.
Right.
Or,
I mean, just something
Right.
like that, then I might. But
Yeah.
dining would not even enter into it. Sightseeing from a historical point.
Okay.
Like I, as a matter of fact, I joke to Hugh all the time, and I said, I really need to go to, Europe by myself, because he'll go do it with me. And it's not that he would hate it necessarily.
He just probably
but
wouldn't be as enthused about the historical sites and museums.
I'll give you an example. We went to DC
Okay.
the first time years ago. We went to DC, and we had the kids with us, and we just weren't there long enough. I mean, you walk around the mall and so many museums, and I didn't even get to half of them. I went back a few years later, and I went with a girlfriend, and we just spent hours every day down going to the different museums and stuff. And I think he would have done that with me, and it would have been different too, because we had the kids with us.
Right.
Or they're only going to be able to do so much of
Exactly.
that.
Right,
I'm
exactly.
saying? So we were a little bit limited that way, but I just am fascinated by a lot of, just the history. I mean, I really would love to go to Italy, and hopefully we'll get there. While we're in Maui, we're going to go ahead and hit Japan,
Oh, nice.
Australia, and New Zealand, while the flight distance is a
Smart.
little bit
Yeah.
less.
Oh, good
So
for you.
we're definitely going to do that, but haven't been to Europe. It's crazy. I've been all over South America, all over the Caribbean. I've been to Australia, and I haven't been to Europe yet. So,
Wow. Now you
yeah, that was great.
and you
That
went down with your mom and dad.
That is absolutely one of the funnest trips I ever had, because Tom was getting married. So down there. And
Did Tom ever live down there? Or
No,
because he married a Brazilian.
He married a Brazilian.
Lena. Okay.
Right. And he met her. My mom and dad and Tom went down there for like a month.
Okay.
And he met
I
Lena
remember this
at that time.
Okay.
And then they kind of just started, really hit it
Right.
off. And then she came here. And I remember him saying to me, well, I don't know if anything's going to happen. And I said, if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen fast.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to die.
Right.
Because she lives too far away.
Okay.
And anyway, they ended up getting married. Well, normally I would have taken Hugh with me, but it just so happened that they got married right after the World Cup was in Los Angeles. And so there were embargoes on all the flights, because Hugh and I can fly for free. And there were embargoes on all the flights. We couldn't fly for free. So I had to buy a
Right.
ticket. We were moving into a house. I left him in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 kids and a baby. I think Connor was like 10 months old when I left. But it was so fun to go with my immediate family, because once you're an adult and you get married and have kids,
Right.
everybody's in the mix. And so you're
Right.
worried about whether your husband's having a good time. What are the kids doing? Are they driving anybody crazy? Whatever. You're just constantly, your focus is
Right.
a lot on that. And it was so great to just go and be with my immediate family and spend time with them, because Liz, her husband, didn't go either. So it was just, Ruben was there with
Okay, yeah.
with Frank, but
Right.
but the rest of my, the rest of the spouses weren't there. So it was really fun.
What year was that?
Oh my gosh, 94.
94.
Yeah.
So it was probably just 2 or 3 years after that your mom traveled down to Chile to visit
Yes.
our family where we
Yep.
were living.
Yep.
And Sarah tells a funny story, and I don't know if you've heard this story or know this story. So Sarah and Corrine, they flew down to the southern part of Chile. They were in Osorno, I think, or Puerto Montt, somewhere just southern part of Chile. Gorgeous. And they had a driver, and he was driving them to some site. And Sarah had fallen asleep in the taxi. And your mom started waking Sarah up saying, Sarah, wake up. Can you tell him to wake up? He's fallen asleep.
Oh, how funny.
The driver was falling
Oh,
asleep.
wow.
And your mom was so nervous because it was a different language. So she was waking Sarah up to wake up
to
the
wake
driver.
No, I did not
Yeah,
know
Sarah
that.
just told
That's
me that a couple of
crazy.
weeks ago, told me that story. And I always tell Sarah, I'm so envious of her that she got that trip with your mom to the southern part of Chile. And they did. They just flew down there for a couple of days to sightsee. The
And
two
my
of them. And then
parents-
your mom came back down to Santiago.
My mom has tons of pictures, by the way.
Oh, does she?
Yeah,
Oh,
of that trip.
was awesome. That was
So-
so neat. Okay, talk about your mom. Now, going back, I talked about how your mom aged gracefully.
Mm-hmm.
She really did. But your mom, her last few years were very hard, very rough.
You know what struck me? I was actually at Bunko when this happened, and because one of the girls' moms is in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and so she was kind of questioning me, and she said, "When did your mom? When did you find out that
Right.
your mom had Alzheimer's?" And I said, "She was 62,"
Wow.
and she said, "Well, how old was she when she passed away?" And I said, "She was 81." And her whole body just kind of deflated, and she went 20 years. And for some reason, I had never thought of it in those terms that it was that long, but it really was that long. You know, that's crazy to me. And I think the reason that I don't think about that is because the last 8 years in particular were ridiculously sad and hard and
Right.
hard to deal with because she
Right.
couldn't walk or talk or, feed herself or toilet herself or...
Right.
And it was, to watch somebody live in that. I mean, where's their mind? Had no clue who we were,
Right.
or who anybody was, or and yeah, that was really, it was just hard. But I guess that the fact that, I've always just been thinking, oh, the last 8 years, how can this go on for 8 years? 8 years, 8 years. This is all I was thinking,
Right.
And then when I was talking to her and she said 20 years, I was just I felt like somebody punched me almost
Right. It was
because
a true
I hadn't
realization.
really, because, initially she was able to talk and still knew who we were and
Right.
things like that, even though she was forgetting everything and repeating herself a million times, but it wasn't the same, as it got worse.
Right. So the last 8 years were the hardest.
Yes. Yeah. In some respects.
Right.
I mean, early onset Alzheimer's hard because they realize something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And so she was angry a lot
Right.
because she couldn't understand,
Right.
why this was happening and things like that. So, that was a little frustrating.
And would you say that brought you and your siblings closer together?
Oh,
Just going through this, one of the most beautiful things, first of all, your mom's funeral was amazing. I love going to a funeral where I leave feeling inspired, where I've learned something and I walk out of that funeral saying, I want to be like this person. I would love for people to say even just a fraction of these things about me. But all of you were so eloquent with your words. You're all very bright people, first of all, but you were just so eloquent and so articulate. But one of the things that I love that you talked about was, I'm pretty sure it was you, maybe it was Liz, but I'm pretty sure it was you, was when you guys all went into this, you all just came to an understanding that you're in this together and you're not going to point fingers and say, you didn't do enough, you didn't do
Right.
enough. You're all going through different phases of life, right?
Right.
And you're all going through times where your families and your kids may need a little more attention and you may not be able to be there for your mom as much as Liz in that moment.
Right.
Or Tom in that
Yes.
moment. And I just remember thinking about that. And that was a powerful message.
I'm thankful that we were able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the reasons that we even talked about it was because when my mother's parents were going through it, there was some finger pointing among the siblings.
So you had seen it firsthand.
Corrine's can't be right. They can't be that bad. But they lived out of town, and so
Right.
when you only come up for a weekend, you're not going to see what somebody's like on a daily basis for a
Exactly.
long time. And I remember one of my uncles came and stayed for like 3 weeks, and he went back and said, "It's exactly what Carolyn and Corrine are saying it is."
Right.
And type thing. And because of that, and my mom would get her feelings hurt, and they don't believe me,
Right.
and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember her saying things like that to me. And so when all of this started, and then when my dad had to go in a facility too, I can just remember standing outside the hospital. We were getting ready to leave, and my dad happened to be in the hospital at the time. And I just looked at my siblings. I said, we're not going to do this. We are not. I said, we cannot help each other if we're finger pointing,
Right.
And stuff. But I will also tell you that, there's only 3 of us.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference. I mean, when you've got 6 kids and, there is, because I'm watching some friends go through that right now. There's 5 kids.
Right.
And there's a little, there's some disagreeing going on about what to do.
Right. Exactly.
And one of the things that frustrated me was I was the power of attorney. And so I would say, but I didn't feel like I was not going to be, I'm making the decisions.
Right.
You
were all in this together.
Right.
Equal
and I would
parts.
be like, what do you guys think?
Right.
And sometimes because they would go back and forth. And finally I'd go, we're doing this, because I would just get to the point where, and I kind of would feel bad about that occasionally. And I remember saying to Liz one time, I said, I feel bad because I feel like I ask you, but then I make the decision. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, she's a very insightful person, but she said, the thing that you don't realize is that you are a decision maker and Tom and I are not. Mm. She said, so it's good that you ask us, but if we can't agree on something, or not even agree, but come to a conclusion, then, you it's good that you are going to say, we do this. One of the hard things about that, though, with personality wise, when she didn't like something that was going on at the facility, a lot of times she would call me and say, and I think it was a combination of her personality and the fact that I think she thought, well, Jamie's the power of attorney, so she's the one that has to say something, type thing. And so she would complain about something. And finally, one time I told her, I said, look, you're her daughter. It doesn't have to be me because I'm the power of attorney. If you see something that you don't like, it's your responsibility. It's your prerogative to go in there and say, I don't like this. Mm-hmm. And then if there's a problem, I certainly will step in.
Exactly.
But overall, we were very fortunate because we went several times a week between the 3 of us, almost all the time.
Yeah.
If one of us was going to be out of town, we constantly had a text message going, group text saying, I'm going to be gone this week, just letting you guys know, type thing. So I feel fortunate. That we were able to get through that together.
Yeah. Could you imagine going through that alone?
I can't. And Liz's ex-husband actually had to do that. He was an only child. And I can't even fathom that because it is hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing.
Well, going back to decisions that had to be made. I don't know. I would assume you guys had to make a lot of very hard decisions. And I'm sure that there were decisions that maybe your siblings may have known were the right decision, but it was maybe hard to come to that realization. And so having you as that strong, blunt person that's just going to say how it is, I'm sure you were a big blessing in your siblings' lives.
And
maybe. Your parents' lives.
It's hard for me. I think it's hard for anybody to see that, see that in themselves necessarily.
Right.
But yes, they told me that. I'm sure that
was a big blessing. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Wow. Well, I think you're all fantastic, honestly. All fantastic.
Thank
and I
you.
know your parents are extremely proud of you. And I'll tell you, they're so, so classy. And you're classy.
I don't know about the classy part.
You're fun. You're sassy. You're so lively. I'm just so excited for you in this new opportunity. Being in Hawaii over the next few years and writing that book of yours.
I'll let you know. I'll let you proofread.
This is where my producer comes in. So Jeff, as my producer, has a segment where we like to challenge our guests to do something.
Go. Okay.
So I leave that to Jeff.
You already know your challenge is, right?
My challenge is to write a book, right? Or a screenplay.
A story.
A story. That's,
A story.
Yeah.
So you can accept that challenge?
I'll accept that challenge.
No,
I'm serious.
Okay.
We're gonna have a follow-up to see.
Because you will be back visiting.
Yes, I will.
So we don't need to wait the 3 years or however long you end up staying in Hawaii. Last question.
Okay.
How long have you been in your house?
15 years.
15 years. That's a long time. Is this difficult? Is it hard to kind of see the movers come in and close this chapter of your lives and move on to the next?
This is the longest we've ever lived in one house.
Okay.
It's my favorite house that
I
I've
love
lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I have mixed emotions about it because there are times, I mean, it's too big for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that we were going to have to downsize
Right.
eventually. But oddly, I haven't been too sentimental about it until today when they were coming and,
It just kind of,
packing more stuff up. And
yeah.
I'm thinking, wow, this is,
Yeah.
I'm not going to live here anymore.
It's hard.
So, and I hope I find something. I think the other thing is I really like the floor plan. So sometimes I'll think, I hope I can, when we come back, I can find something that I
Absolutely.
like.
Right.
That I like as much as I like this house.
Right.
So,
But change is exciting. It
it
can be
is.
hard, but it's exciting.
and one of the reasons that we're doing it is because I don't know if I'm going to get Alzheimer's like my mom did, but we just talked about having an adventure while we're young and still
Yeah.
healthy.
Smart.
Because Hugh told me, he said, I don't want to be 75 years old. You have Alzheimer's and we never did anything.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to go do this.
Good
my
for
my
you.
kids are kind of bummed a little bit about
It's
it.
hard.
But,
Yeah.
But I think that it'll be a fun thing. We're going to live in this little 1,100 square foot 2-bedroom thing. I said, it'll be
Amazing.
like being first married again.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Exactly. You need to incorporate that
So-
into your book. This is a whole good story.
Sex in the
Sex in
60s, right?
60s. Sex on the beach in the 60s.
I'm definitely going back and saying, they asked me about sex in the 60s, Hugh.
And sex on the beach.
And he is so much more reserved than I am. He'd be horrified, but that's okay.
Oh, I love it. You know what? But you guys are great. You guys are awesome. I love that you're off to have this adventure and you're just
it'll be
living
fun.
life to the fullest, and good for you.
It'll be fun.
All right. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for visiting.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Jeff, we're done.